Would you sacrifice your entire future to save a stranger who might not even survive? It is a question that sounds noble in the abstract, but when the clock is ticking and the heavy doors of opportunity are swinging shut, the answer becomes a terrifying gamble with your own life. For Simone Carter, the morning of May 12th was not a philosophical debate. It was a countdown written in sweat and adrenaline. The time was 7:42 a.m. The final nursing licensure exam, the culmination of 4 years of sleepless nights, double shifts at the diner, and tuition scraped together from crumpled tips, was scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. sharp. The rules were absolute. Doors lock at 8 o'clock, no exceptions, no late entries, no refunds. If she missed this, the wait list for the next testing cycle was 6 months away. 6 months she could not afford. Her bank account balance sat at $43.12. Her rent was due in 3 days. The math was cruel and simple. She had 18 minutes to sprint 6 blocks, clear security, and find her seat. Simone's breath hitched in her throat as she adjusted her backpack, the light blue fabric of her scrub uniform catching the cold morning wind. She was running, her sneakers slapping against the wet pavement, her mind replaying the anatomy flashcards she had studied until dawn. Then she saw the heap of gray wool on the sidewalk. It was easy to miss, tucked between a fire hydrant and an overflowing trash bin, just a shape in the periphery of a city that had learned to look away. But Simone saw the hand. It was trembling, pale and thin, reaching out into the empty air before collapsing back onto the concrete. Simone's pace faltered. Her watch read 7:45 a.m. If she stopped now, even for a minute, the timeline would fracture. She looked ahead toward the imposing brick building of the testing center, visible just down the street. It was right there. The future she had bled for was within sprinting distance. She looked back at the gray wool. A low groan, wet and rattling, cut through the noise of the waking city. It was the sound of a lung filling with fluid, a sound Simone recognized instantly from her clinical rotations. Don't do it. A voice in her head whispered, a voice that sounded like her landlord, like the debt collectors, like the fear of poverty that chased her every day. Someone else will call. You have to go. She took one step toward the exam. Then she saw the blood pooling beneath the woman's head, dark and expanding against the sidewalk. The binary moral dilemma slammed into her chest. Be a nurse in title, or be a nurse in action. She cursed, a sharp, fractured sound, and dropped to her knees.
7:47 a.m.
She wasn't going to make it. The woman was elderly, her skin translucent and cold, her breathing shallow. Simone went into autopilot, the panic about the exam replaced by the icy clarity of Tree.
Mom?
Can you hear me? Simone asked, her hands moving fast, checking the pulse, checking the airway. The woman's eyes fluttered open, dark and terrified, fixing on Simone's face. She mumbled something in a language Simone didn't speak, Korean perhaps, her grip surprisingly strong as she clutched Simone's wrist. Simone pulled her phone out, dialing 911 with a thumb that shook only slightly. I have an elderly female, had trauma, possible internal bleeding, unconscious but reactive. 4th and Main. Send them now. She stripped off her windbreaker, bunching it under the woman's head to stabilize her neck, ignoring the damp cold soaking into her own light blue scrubs. The blood from the woman's scalp wound transferred to Simone's hands, staining the pristine blue fabric with the harsh reality of trauma.
7:55 a.m.
The siren wailed in the distance, but it was too far away. Simone held the woman's hand, rubbing her knuckles to keep her conscious. Stay with me, Simone said, her voice steady despite the tears pricking the corners of her eyes. My name is Simone. I'm here. You're not alone, the woman squeezed back, her gaze locking onto Simone with an intensity that felt like a transfer of souls. By the time the paramedics arrived, loading the stretcher with chaotic efficiency, the time was 8:04 a.m. The ambulance doors slammed shut. The street was quiet again. Simone stood there, blood drying on her hands, her jacket gone, her future disappearing as the digital numbers on her watch mocked her.
8:05 a.m.
She had saved a life, and in doing so, she had destroyed her own. The walk to the testing center felt like a funeral march. Simone didn't run. There was no point in running anymore. She moved with the heavy, numb gait of someone walking through water. When she reached the double glass doors of the examination hall, they were locked. Through the glass, she could see the proctor, a man named Dean Holloway, a figure known for his rigid adherence to protocol and his distaste for excuses. He was pacing the front of the room, distributing packets. Simone knocked on the glass. It was a soft sound, barely audible. Holloway turned. His eyes swept over her, taking in the disheveled hair, the missing jacket, and the dark, rust-colored stains on her light blue scrubs. He checked the clock on the wall, 8:12 a.m. He shook his head once, a sharp, dismissive motion, and turned his back. Panic, hot and desperate, flared in Simone's chest. She knocked harder, the sound ringing out in the quiet hallway. "Please," she mouthed through the glass. "I had an emergency." "Please," Holloway paused. He walked slowly toward the door, not to open it, but to stand on the other side like a warden. He pointed to the sign taped to the glass, "NO, late admittance. Zero tolerance." Simone pressed her ID against the glass, her hand leaving a smudge. "I stopped to help someone," she shouted, her voice muffled by the safety glass. "I'm a nursing student. I had to stop." Holloway cracked the door open 2 inches, just enough to let his voice slice through the air. "Miss Carter," he said, his tone flat and bored. "If you were a nurse, you would know that punctuality is the first requirement of the profession. If you cannot manage your time, you cannot manage a patient." He looked pointedly at the blood on her shirt. "And you are out of uniform code. Contaminated clothing is a health violation. Go home." He slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Simone stood there, the vibration of the slam traveling up her arm. Inside, she saw rows of heads bent over papers, students who had walked past the gray heap on the sidewalk, students who hadn't stopped.
They were taking the test.
They were becoming nurses. She was standing in the hallway, shivering, smelling of iron and exhaust fumes. She turned around, sliding down the wall until she hit the floor, burying her face in her knees.
She didn't cry.
She was too hollow for tears. She just sat there under the buzzing fluorescent lights, waiting for the strength to stand up and walk back to a life that had just become infinitely harder. The aftermath of a moral choice often feels less like a reward and more like a punishment. That evening, Simone sat at the small, chipped laminate table in her studio apartment, the silence of the room amplifying the ringing in her ears. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a crushing exhaustion and a terrifying clarity about her financial ruin. On the counter lay a stack of envelopes: electricity, internet, rent. She picked up a pen and did the math again on the back of a napkin. Even with extra shifts, she was short. The tuition for the exam prep course was non-refundable. The next testing window required a new fee. She was negative $300 before she even bought groceries. She opened her laptop, the screen illuminating her tired face, and refreshed her email. There it was, the official notification from the nursing board, sent by Dean Holloway's office. Subject: Notice of absenteeism and forfeiture of candidacy. The language was cold, precise, and devoid of humanity. Failure to appear constitutes a withdrawal. Reapplication permitted in 6 months, pending board review of candidacy suitability. The words stung worse than the financial loss. They were questioning if she was suitable to care for people because she had stopped to care for a person. She heard a heavy sigh from the hallway. It was Mr. Henderson, the building's elderly security guard who worked the night shift at the university campus. He often stopped by to check on her, a quiet, observant man who had seen generations of students come and go. The door was slightly ajar, and he knocked softly. "Rough day, kid?" he asked, leaning on his cane. Simone didn't look up from the screen. "I missed it, Mr. Henderson. I missed the exam." He stepped inside, his face lined with sympathy. "I saw," he said quietly. Simone looked up, startled. "You saw me?" Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "I was watching the cameras at the perimeter."
Saw you stop for that old lady.
"Saw the ambulance." He paused, shifting his weight. "And I saw Holloway check his watch when you knocked."
He saw the blood, Simone.
He knew what happened. He didn't care. Simone felt a fresh wave of anger. "He said I was out of uniform. He said I couldn't manage my time," Mr. Henderson scoffed. a dry, bitter sound. Holloway manages numbers, not people. He's trying to clear the waitlist to keep his efficiency stats up. You were just a number he could scratch off. This revelation didn't comfort her. It solidified the injustice. It wasn't just bad luck. It was a system working exactly as it was designed, to filter out the inconvenient, even if the inconvenience was compassion. "What do I do?" she whispered, the fight draining out of her. Mr. Henderson placed a hand on her shoulder. "You keep the evidence," he said, tapping the table. "You write down everything.
The time.
The ambulance number. The color of Holloway's tie. Truth has a way of needing receipts," he left her then, closing the door softly. Simone spent the next 3 hours typing an appeal letter, attaching her pristine clinical records, her GPA, her statement of events. She hit send at 11 p.m. At 11:02 p.m., an automated reply bounced back. Appeals for absenteeism are only considered with 48-hour prior notice or documented hospitalization of the candidate. The system had walls on all sides. She closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark, listening to the rain begin to hammer against the window. It felt like the city was weeping with her. She had done the right thing, and it had cost her everything. She vowed then that she would never regret saving that woman. But God, it hurt to be good. The clock on the microwave read 1:17 a.m. when the headlights swept across her living room wall. They were bright, blindingly white, cutting through the thin curtains of her ground floor window. Simone froze. She lived in a neighborhood where cars didn't idle. They kept moving or they were trouble. She heard the heavy thud of car doors closing, not one, but 3, in quick succession. Then the sound of boots on the pavement, purposeful and synchronized. Fear, cold and primal, spiked in her chest. She stood up, grabbing the baseball bat she kept behind the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Was it the landlord? No, he wouldn't come this late with a crew. Police? She hadn't done anything. The footsteps stopped right outside her door. There was a pause, a heavy silence that felt charged with electricity, and then a knock. It wasn't a pound. It was 3 distinct, firm raps. Knock, knock, knock. "Who is it?" Simone called out, her voice trembling but loud. She gripped the bat tighter. "Simone Carter?" A deep voice answered. It wasn't aggressive, but it carried an authority that vibrated through the wood. "Open the door, please." "We need to speak. I'm calling the police," Simone warned, backing away. "We are not the police," the voice replied, calm and unbothered. "And we are not here to hurt you. You saved Madam Park this morning. We are here to thank you." The name froze her. Madam Park. The woman on the sidewalk. Simone lowered the bat slightly, confusion warring with instinct. She moved to the peephole. Outside, amidst the pouring rain, stood a wall of men in black suits. In the center stood a man who looked nothing like the neighborhood roughs or the debt collectors. He was young, perhaps late 20s, with sharp, angular features and eyes that seemed to absorb the street lamp light. He held a black umbrella, perfectly dry, while the men around him stood in the rain, indifferent to the storm. He looked like power personified, dangerous, elegant, and terrifyingly out of place. Simone unlocked the deadbolt with shaking fingers, opening the door just as far as the chain allowed. The man bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a full, 90-degree bow from the waist, a gesture of profound respect that shocked her into silence. The men behind him bowed in unison. When he straightened, his expression was grave. "I am Taesung Park," he said. "The woman you stopped for. The woman you sacrificed your exam for. Is my grandmother." He looked at her, his eyes scanning her tired face, the cheap apartment, the despair clinging to her like a shadow. "She told me you were wearing blue scrubs. She told me you looked at your watch, and then you stayed." He reached into his jacket pocket. Simone flinched, but he only pulled out a folded piece of paper, a printout of her expulsion email. "How do you have that?" she whispered. "I have resources," Taesung said simply. "I know what this cost you. And I am here to tell you that the debt is accepted." He signaled to one of his men, who stepped forward with a sleek, leather briefcase. "May we come in? The rain is heavy, and we have a strategy to discuss." Simone unhooked the chain. She didn't know why. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, Or perhaps it was the strange, magnetic certainty in Taesung's voice. He stepped into her tiny, cluttered apartment, his expensive suit looking almost alien against the peeling wallpaper. He didn't look around with judgment. He looked with a simmering, quiet rage. He saw the textbooks stacked on the floor, the instant noodle cups, the final notice spill on the counter. He placed the briefcase on the table, right next to her laptop. "My grandmother is in surgery," Taesung began, his voice dropping an octave. "But she is alive because of you." The doctor said another 10 minutes on that cold pavement would have been fatal. He turned to face her, his demeanor shifting from formal to fierce. "You saved the matriarch of my family. In my world, that makes you family." Simone shook her head, feeling overwhelmed. "I just did what I was trained to do. I didn't know who she was. That is why it matters," Taesung said. "You helped a stranger when it cost you everything. That is rare. And I do not allow my family to be disrespected." He tapped the printout of the email from Dean Holloway. "This man, Holloway. He denied you entry?" "Yes," Simone said, her voice cracking. "He said rules are rules." Taesung's lips curled into a cold, predatory smile, though his eyes remained warm when they looked at her. "I love rules," he said softly. "Rules are excellent tools when you know how to wield them." Holloway thinks he is the gatekeeper. He does not realize he has just locked the gate on himself. He opened the briefcase. Inside, it wasn't stacks of cash, as Simone had expected. It was files, blueprints, a tablet displaying a live feed of the university campus, and a thick dossier labeled Holloway D. "I could pay your tuition for 100 years, Taesung said, dismissing the money issue with a wave of his hand. "And I will handle your debts. But that is not justice. Justice is you walking back into that room and taking the test you deserve." He pulled out a chair and sat down, motioning for her to join him. "Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., there is an emergency board hearing regarding the facility's security protocols. I have arranged for it to become a hearing about you." Simone stared at him.
How? I'm nobody.
"They won't listen to me." Taesung leaned forward, the intensity of his gaze pinning her in place. "You are not nobody. You are the woman who saved Madam Park. And you have me." He slid a folder toward her. "Holloway has a history of selective enforcement. We have emails. We have testimony from previous students. And we have the security footage from this morning, which Mr. Henderson was kind enough to secure before it was accidentally deleted." Simone looked at the folder, then at Taesung. "You know Mr. Henderson?" "We had a conversation an hour ago," Taesung said. "He is a good man. He wants to see you when." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Get some sleep, Simone. Tomorrow you wear your scrubs. Not the clean ones. The ones with the blood. We're going to show them exactly what a nurse looks like." The morning of the hearing, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of more rain. Simone stood in front of the mirror, staring at the light blue scrub top. The rust-colored stain on the hem and sleeve had darkened overnight. It looked violent. It looked unprofessional. It looked real. She pulled it on, her hands trembling. Outside, the black SUV was waiting. Taesung held the door open for her, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she admitted. "Good," he replied. "Fear keeps you sharp." The drive to the university administration building was silent. Simone gripped the leather armrest, her mind racing. She was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but the truth and a man she had met 6 hours ago who happened to command a small army of lawyers and enforcers. When they pulled up to the curb, the contrast was stark. The building was a monolith of glass and steel, designed to intimidate. Taesung exited first, buttoning his suit jacket. 2 lawyers flanked him, carrying briefcases that looked heavy with ammunition. Simone stepped out, feeling the stares of students walking to class. They looked at her scrubs, at the blood, then quickly looked away. They entered the lobby. The receptionist looked up, startled by the entourage. "I'm here for the board meeting," Taesung said, his voice smooth as silk. "I believe Dean Holloway is expecting a security audit." Before the receptionist could object, Taesung strode past the desk toward the elevators, Simone in his wake. They rode up to the top floor in silence. When the elevator doors slid open, they revealed a long conference room with glass walls. Inside, Dean Holloway sat at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by other administrators and board members. He looked up, his face registering confusion, then annoyance. "Excuse me," Holloway said, standing up. "This is a closed session."
Who are you?
Taesung didn't stop until he was at the foot of the table. He placed his hands on the polished wood. "I am the reason your security footage from yesterday morning has been preserved," Taesung said. "And this," he gestured to Simone, "is the student you illegally barred from her exam," Holloway scoffed, his face reddening. "This is preposterous. Security, remove them. Miss Carter, your persistence is bordering on harassment." "Sit down, Dean," one of Taesung's lawyers said, opening a laptop and connecting it to the room's main screen. The authority in the voice was absolute. Holloway hesitated, looking at the other board members who were watching with wide eyes. "You quoted Policy 74 regarding punctuality," Taesung said, his voice rising, filling the room. "But you ignored Policy 91 regarding medical good Samaritan emergencies, which states that any student involved in a life-saving event on campus grounds is granted an automatic deferral or immediate seating upon arrival," Holloway sputtered. "She wasn't on campus grounds. She was down the street," Taesung signaled the lawyer. The screen behind Holloway flickered to life. It showed a satellite map of the campus, with a bright red line marking the property boundary. The spot where Madam Park had collapsed was exactly 3 feet inside the red line. "Technically," Taesung said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, "she was on university property, which makes you not only heartless, but legally negligent." The room went silent. Holloway looked at the screen, then at Simone. His arrogance began to fracture. This is a technicality," he sneered. "She is still unfit. Look at her. She's wearing biohazard material in a meeting." Simone stepped forward then. The fear she had felt earlier evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard clarity of someone who had held a dying woman's hand. "This isn't biohazard material, Dean," she said, her voice steady. "It's proof. You told me I couldn't manage my time. You were right. I didn't manage my time. I gave my time to someone who had none left." She looked around the table at the board members. "If being a nurse means checking a watch while someone bleeds out on the sidewalk, then I don't want your license. But if it means saving lives, then I am the only person in this room who passed the test yesterday." A heavy silence hung in the air. One of the older board members, a woman with gray hair and a stern face, looked at Simone, then at the footage of the ambulance on the screen. She looked at Holloway, whose face was now pale. "Mr. Holloway," the board member said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Is it true you refused her entry at 8:12 a.m.? Holloway stammered. "The rules are the rules," Taesung interrupted, "are there to serve humanity, not to strangle it." He placed a second document on the table. "This is a signed affidavit from the Chief of Surgery at Mercy General. It states that had Miss Carter not intervened, the patient would be dead. It also commends her triage skills as textbook perfect." Taesung leaned in close to Holloway. "The patient is my grandmother, and I am quite wealthy and quite litigious. If Miss Carter is not seated for an exam within the hour, I will sue this university for every brick in this building." The shift in power was palpable. The board members exchanged nervous glances. The chairwoman stood up. "Dean Holloway, please step outside." Holloway looked like he had been slapped. He gathered his papers with shaking hands and walked out, avoiding Simone's gaze. The chairwoman turned to Simone. "Miss Carter," she said, her tone softening, "we apologize for the oversight. We cannot administer the full exam today as the proctors have left." Simone's heart sank. "However," the woman continued, "we can grant you an emergency individual proctoring.
Right now.
In this building." She looked at Taesung. "Assuming that satisfies your legal counsel?" Taesung nodded once. "It is acceptable." The chairwoman looked at Simone's scrubs. "But first, we'll get you a clean uniform." The exam room was quiet, a small office converted for the purpose. Simone sat at the desk, the test booklet in front of her. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the smell of paper and pencil shavings. She thought of the cold pavement. She thought of Madam Park's grip. She thought of Taesung standing guard in the hallway outside. She opened her eyes, picked up the pencil, and began to write. The questions flowed easily. Patient presents with.
Priority intervention is.
It wasn't just theory anymore. It was memory. She finished in record time. When she walked out, Tae-sung was waiting. He wasn't on his phone. He was just standing there, watching the door. Well, he asked. Simone exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that released 2 days of terror. I passed, she said. I know I passed. 6 months later, the graduation ceremony was held in the main auditorium. The hall was packed with families, flowers, and balloons. Simone Carter walked across the stage, her name called out over the speakers. She wore the crisp white uniform of a graduate nurse. In the front row, amidst the cheering parents, sat a strange trio. Mr. Henderson, in his best Sunday suit, clapping loudly. Next to him, Madam Park, frail but smiling, holding a bouquet of lilies. And beside her, Tae-sung, wearing sunglasses indoors, a small, proud smile on his face. As Simone took her diploma, she looked down at them. She didn't just see allies. She saw a new kind of family, forged in the fire of a single, impossible choice. The dean was gone, replaced by the woman who had chaired the hearing. The system had changed just a little because one person had refused to look away. Simone walked off the stage, holding the paper that said she was a nurse, but knowing she had been one long before they gave her the title. The future was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, it looked kind.